We are again with another episode of Who is Afraid of Humanities, and today we have Léna with us, Léna Remy-Kovach, who is a PhD candidate in North American Indigenous Literatures at the University of Freiburg in Germany. She's also a lecturer in North American Studies at the University of Freiburg. So it's such a privilege, it's such a pleasure to have you, Léna, with us.
Thank you, Tilin.
Yeah, to talk about your engagement, your research, and your contribution in the field of humanities and art. We will start off with the usual question that we started this podcast. We will describe your background to our viewers and listeners, sort of where you're coming from and what your current engagements are, so that they will be able to have an idea about, your position when it comes to discussions in data.
Okay, sure. So first of all, thank you for having me. So my name is Léna Remy-Kovach, as you said. So I grew up in France, and I did 2 BAs at the same time at the University of Strasbourg, which is in the northeast. And then I went for an internship at Penn State, the Pennsylvania State University in central Pennsylvania. And I was teaching French there. So I was taking North American studies and indigenous history and archaeology, but I was teaching French. Then I went back to Strasbourg to finish my master's program and defend my thesis on Native Americans in photography. And after that, I got an internship for Canada, so I moved again. And I spent 2 years at Carleton University, which is in the capital, Ottawa, on Algonquin unceded territories. And I did a second master's in Indigenous Studies, and I was teaching French again, but that was a bit different because I was teaching French to Canadian students, so most of them already spoke it a bit, but like Canadian French, so that was very different. And now I'm back to Europe. I'm so in southwest Germany, so it's actually very close to Strasbourg, or about 2 hours away, for my PhD. And so yes, I teach North American studies, so American and Canadian literature, and then cultural studies. I try to introduce indigenous studies to my students as much as I can, literatures, histories, visual arts, pop cultures. And for my PhD research, I look at indigenous literatures, very recent, very contemporary indigenous literatures from what we now know as North America. And I look at Gothic, dark fantasy, just a tiny little bit of sci-fi, very recent books, and I look at the strategies for healing that the characters organize, and I try to see if we can adapt those into trauma-informed educational guidelines for indigenous youth. Like if we could use this literature to help teachers take better care of indigenous youth and also accompany indigenous youth at school through literature. So that's my background. That's the different types of involvement that I have in different fields of the humanities.
Yeah, can you tell us how you contextualize the term indigenous in your research? Like which groups are you looking at? Which literature are you looking at?
So I actually have very, very various books from very diverse people from many different cultural groups. I don't focus on a specific linguistic or cultural or religious group, like you could focus on Inuit literature or Métis or Cree or Algonquian, like however categorization you want to look at. I don't really look at, I look at who the authors are and who the characters are, but that doesn't that wasn't a criteria to like who I include. I try to have a diverse array of books, so I do have books by Inuit writers, Métis, Cree,
Mhm.
Blackfoot, Blackfeet, Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, Sioux, but mostly. So I don't want to create, any type of pan-Indianism. I'm not saying,
Okay.
oh look, they're all from diverse backgrounds, but they're all doing the same thing anyway. That would be very dangerous.
Okay.
But I am saying that there are common avenues and common strategies that we can manifest
Okay.
that seem to be helpful for that could be applied to diverse groups of
Uh-huh.
indigenous youth. But I mostly look at the genres, so I picked my corpus depending on the genre. So
Okay.
horror, gothic, and dark
Mhm.
fantasy. Yeah.
Mhm. 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 Okay. So being predominantly studied and taught at European universities and
Hmm.
in the USA, in specifically North America, what is your experience being a humanities student or and a humanities educator? If I were to ask
Mm,
that very last question from you.
yeah. Um, the big difference, I think, is in the way funding and budget are allocated. Um, we all know that North American institutions have this reputation of being extremely expensive in terms of tuition, and they are. They absolutely are, and student debt is a huge problem.
Mhm.
Um, but it like when people say, oh, in Europe, university is completely free, which is almost the case. I mean, it's about $100 for a year,
Mhm.
and that sometimes like includes even healthcare, like student services, things like this. So of course it's a much better price, but also there is no private funding
Okay.
allowed. Some like hard sciences manage to get private fundings from different institutes, from different companies, but that's mostly because of equipment, things like this. It's a bit different. But in terms of the humanities, that would be the huge difference, is that at European universities, we don't pay a lot of tuition, but we also don't get much because everything is government funded.
Okay.
So, for example, when I was in Strasbourg, for the whole School of Humanities, so languages, literatures, social work, which for us was on the same campus, law, and education programs, like people who wanted to become teachers, all of us had to share two photocopy machines, which were at the cafeteria, for example, for like 5 years until they installed new ones at the library.
Mm.
uh, Teachers have to pay for the chalk that they use in classrooms. Each student is responsible for their own photocopies. There are no, when there's books or DVDs or materials which are assigned, um, sometimes the library doesn't even have a copy for you to borrow. So these things have a huge impact too on, um, the diversity of the student body, and the things that teachers can
Mm.
offer, can provide, sadly. Now that doesn't mean that in the US or in Canada, because tuition was so expensive, um, that it's good that tuition is so expensive. Like, I'm not saying that either. And there's probably many very detailed, like, structural differences in how budget is allocated, which I don't know about. But
Okay.
it's true that when I was studying in the US and then in Canada, there was more that was possible,
Okay.
both in terms of, as a teacher, what you can provide to your students and how you can help them succeed, and also as a student, like, progressing and succeeding in your program was easier because you had,
Mhm.
there were computer labs everywhere. You could print, you could, like, all of these things that we don't necessarily think about, but that are necessary for research.
Mhm.
People think that only scientists need, equipment, they need a lab, they need, yes, okay, but
Mhm.
um, doing, like, studies in the humanities doesn't mean that you don't need anything. Like, you need to buy your books, you need,
Yeah.
um, so it might seem like, small details, but I realized that it made a huge difference in terms of who was advancing faster or better in their program,
Okay.
as compared to, between these two different types of universities.
Mhm. Um, being a quote unquote white person at your university,
I
at
am.
yeah, at your institute, you would have seen students from different backgrounds, probably
Mhm.
geographic, different
Mhm.
backgrounds, studying in the humanities and
Mhm.
dealing with the same issues that you dealt with. Have you been able to have a dialogue with them? Have you been able to exchange any kind of, have a conversation with them about how they try to navigate
Mhm.
the field of humanities, or how they try to navigate this kind of crisis, especially when they're,
Mhm.
when they're at a space like that.
Mhm. So in North America, especially in when I was in Canada in Ottawa, there were specific services that were designed for Indigenous students. So it was very important that we knew as instructors, what was available so that we could direct students to those services.
Yeah.
Both in terms of funding, like scholarships and stuff, but then also there was a student center. They could use it to call home because most of them were very, very far from their home communities.
Mhm.
So that was as simple as, like allowing them to call home whenever they wanted to. There was an elders lodge.
Okay.
So every week there was a local elder in residence. So that person might not have been from, the same community or cultural background as the students, but um, that was enabling them to have, some conversations that we as non-indigenous instructors could not have, and like stuff that we could not provide. Um, Here in Freiburg, where I'm at, there are also programs developed to help marginalized students like insert themselves into the university, like access the services that we have. So,
Mhm.
for example, there's an association called Uni für Alle, and it pairs students so who are already at the university with newcomers, so new refugees. There's been a lot of new refugees arriving to Germany,
Okay.
and helping them navigate, how to register, all the paperwork, how to get the equivalence with, the degrees that you have in your country with the German ones, how to prove that you speak enough, German or English or Italian or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, so in terms of administration, but then also accompany them throughout their first year after they are registered and taking classes, making sure, they know which classes to take, which ones are best, to take at the beginning of the program, at the end of the program. So it's really like a peer support system.
Okay.
Um, that pairs students with students. But again, it's for newcomers, new political asylees or new refugees who want to come to university. There are other student groups. All of these groups are student organized, student managed. They do receive funding from the university, but they're considered student associations. There's one for Muslim students. There's one for queer students. There's one for um, BIPOC, BIPOC students. So there are different groups like these. Um, in terms of the university itself, in terms of like official services that we do have, there's nothing that is specifically designed, for example, for students of color. But there are services which are, I don't want to say that they give. I think they do. Okay, I'm gonna say that. I think they do give priority, which I think it's a good thing. So I guess I'll say it. It's more my personal opinion, but I feel like they give priority to marginalized students. So services which are open again to everybody. So for example, there's free access to a lawyer. Like if you have, a legal issue, you can have a conversation with a lawyer for free.
Mhm.
And there's psychological counseling, things like these. Um, I don't know if the reason that they give priority, or that it seems that more marginalized students access these services.
Okay.
I don't know if that's because they know about them better. It's because we direct them more to these services than we would white students, or if it's simply that marginalized students need more of these services than
Right.
white German students. It could be a combination of all those things. So, for example, as a teacher, I try to make sure I always know exactly, which services are available to whom,
Yeah.
how they can access them. Like instead of just saying, well, you should go, like, yeah, you can go get counseling. No, you have to say, okay, you can go to, the house, the street. This is the building on the second floor. Go ask Mrs. Something, she will give you an appointment. You will have the choice between, and know exactly what's available, so that you can direct them exactly to their service that they need.
Okay.
Now, in terms of the student population, I have to admit that I haven't had a very diverse, very diverse groups of students, both in class and now. Actually, since we switched to online, so
Okay.
this past semester, I had better, like a more diverse group of students in my classes. But before that, not so much.
Really?
Um,
That's
yeah,
interesting. How did that dynamic, or how does that work out?
I don't know. There are many refugees. There's so many different populations of immigrants, of exchange students. Like, Freiburg as a town is quite diverse, but in terms of who I got in class, so I don't know if it's because of the fields.
Okay.
If it's North American studies, I don't know if it's this one university per se, because there are two other colleges in the town. I don't know. Maybe students prefer those. Um, and then in terms of faculty, my department is extremely white. Not just not very diverse, but very, very extremely white. I really don't want to single her out, but we just hired our first and only Black person as an instructor.
Okay.
Again, I don't know why that is. I don't know if that's just because, this is the type of people who apply for these jobs,
Mhm.
because I have to say that especially my department, my boss is very careful to make space for diverse students as well as instructors.
Mhm.
He's very keen on making sure to provide what marginalized students need. And for example, for research assistants, he will always privilege women or queer students, or single parent students, students of color, to give them the opportunity to get a job on campus, which maybe they wouldn't get at another department. So very, really, for my department itself, I think that it's also because the field is not diverse enough. So not blaming it on people, like it's not open enough, it's not welcoming enough, I guess, for diverse instructors to apply for these positions. So that's why we would need to change. Um, in terms of, yeah, students, mostly again, like since we've been online, I've had um, way more exchange students taking classes because they could just log in. They don't have to travel to Germany for
Yeah.
like a specific semester to take my class. So that's something I'm very happy about, both for, other students. It opens their horizons. It makes the conversations more dynamic. It keeps us in check as well. I mean, I teach Indigenous studies. I have white colleagues who teach African American studies. It's absolutely necessary that we we don't look and we don't play the part of being the experts. Like, we can provide materials, we can ask the students to reflect on topics, but we cannot, express our experiences with the materials, or with the history or anything. So I'm happy to see that it's slowly changing, but we're not there yet, sadly.
Mm-hmm. Like going on a similar line, how does
Hmm.
online teaching and this online, you know, dealing with students online. How
Mm-hmm.
is how has it shifted the dynamics of teaching, especially for you in your experience? Because we see a lot of educators or teachers. There is also this term, Zoom fatigue, right? People are just exhausted. Using Zoom for their teaching, and some people will enjoy it. There are these different perspectives. So, in
Mm-hmm.
your experience, how has this um, in a way changed your perspective on
Mm-hmm.
educating your students or being a teacher to your students?
Mm-hmm. I actually enjoyed it. I
Oh,
was really worried in the beginning, I have to admit, because I was afraid of not being able to engage students with the material enough.
okay.
Um, it went really well for myself, and also like we've had some like debriefs with different colleagues, both in terms of like teaching graduate students, but then also like tenured professors or like my boss.
Mm,
We mostly had very good experiences, and the feedback that we got from our students this term was really good as well.
mm,
um, One thing that I made sure to do was, for example, I didn't make attendance mandatory.
okay.
um, and I made sure to let them know, like from the bat, that nobody would be penalized, for missing or being late or having, a bad connection, something drops, or like turning homework like late, stuff like this. Because um, first I'm usually quite nice with that anyway, but um, just because we now, like teaching, it's like it doesn't mean that all that's happening in the world and in their families and everything is suddenly gone for these 2 hours that they're in front of you. So um, I felt that was very necessary to kind of stay human, and be like, okay, shit happens, but we're in this together. So, for example, in terms of grading the exams or the homeworks, um, I try to make sure to focus on assessing their comprehension
Okay.
and the fact that they were now open to new, types of material or types of sources, things like this, really more than like assessing, the retention. Like, do you really remember the third, slides of week 3 that I posted? There was this graph, like, no. Um, so more, in terms of engaging them with the material.
Mhm,
What was really hard for me was so keeping them engaged, but also in terms of what to give them, because
mhm.
I don't usually just lecture for 2 hours.
Yeah.
So I was worried about group work, discussions, things
Mhm,
like this. So the option of having a forum discussion on the course webpage
mhm,
was very useful, because they could, asynchronously, anytime during the week, they could go and answer to each other. They could ask questions about the materials, and they could be like, oh yeah, this didn't register with me. That's a good idea. So I was monitoring, in the sense I was checking if there was no, I really don't understand that, then I would answer, but I really let them free, and they carried really very really dynamic conversations, and they were engaging with the materials. But that's the one thing that I was really worried about. How do you keep them interested
mhm,
when all you can do is talk to them for like 2 hours, on the screen, and then just give them homework, being like, well, this is what you have to read this week.
mhm,
um, so I gave them, for example, a reading journal for the literature class.
mhm. How
So
does
on
it,
top of this, yeah,
how
did
does
you
it,
that too?
yeah,
Yeah.
how does that work? Yeah.
So at first they were like, oh, like when I announced it, on the first day, I was like, okay, so every week you're gonna write one page, maybe 2 pages. You
Mhm,
just describe what you read throughout the week and what you think about, and that will help us, open the conversation. So at first they were like, oh God, like she's already giving homework. But the feedback I got, like they actually told me literally that they really enjoyed that, because that helped them process the readings
mhm,
much better. So I'm gonna keep doing that. I actually have colleagues. I got this idea from colleagues because that's something that they were doing even in person. They were just asking it, on paper. So, but the difference is that by having it online, I could make them post that throughout the week, and I could look at it throughout the week, and then that would actually help me frame the conversation for the synchronous meeting, because I would see, okay, they all identified, this and this topic, so we don't need to spend so long on it. Or, on the other side, oh, they really missed the point for that one. I really need to focus on that. So that was very helpful. And in the end, they said that it was actually okay. And to make sure that I was not giving them more homework, like in terms of like the whole workload for the course, I allowed them to use bits and pieces from these reading journals and to combine them, whatever, to put in their final papers, like for their essays. So they were allowed to reuse, copy paste, organize, like whatever they wanted to do. So they appreciated that as well. So I'm gonna keep doing that. I have colleagues who made them do video presentations. So they let them record their own presentation, on their own time, like whatever. And they told us that students got really creative. They made music videos, they recorded songs, just like playing the guitar on the bed, or they would go in the garden and be like, find a very nice background with trees and stuff. So they got very, very creative for that. So that was exciting. And one of my colleagues was teaching about the American elections, about women in American politics in the past century, and she put in place like a debate. So she gave them kind of roles to play. So a few of them were presidential candidates, a few of them were vice presidential candidates. One was the moderator, some were journalists, some were lobbyists. They all got roles like this, and then throughout the semester, they did kind of group work to prepare. And then they had a debate, like on Zoom, like each from their house, but they had like a mock debate, and then they actually held elections, and the class voted for like who they thought was the best candidate. So these types of things that we would probably not have thought of, being comfortably in our like in-person teachings. So these are definitely things that we're gonna keep doing, even if we go back, when we go back, I don't know how to say that, to like in-person teaching. These are definitely kind of innovations that we're gonna keep, because it works. Like it really keeps students engaged. It keeps them interested in the materials, and they like it. Like that makes it enjoyable. That makes the course enjoyable, and also that helped them, create these relationships that they're lacking. They were saying like, we just want to chat, we just want to have contacts. Some of us have been stuck for months, like by ourselves in our houses. Some people are with their families, with their partners, whatever. Some people it's like, oh, it's been only me. So that also provided, while working and learning and stuff, this social interaction that they told us they were absolutely craving. So
Yeah, that's great. And I think as humanities educators, we have a lot more responsibility, rather than ethical responsibility, right, in our classrooms. Especially the way we use our pedagogy, and how we get our students involved, and how we try to develop their intuitions. I would like to know your initiatives, your collaborations, especially in the field of arts and humanities. What kind of initiatives have you started? Because I know a couple of them that you've told me before. What kind of networks or what kind of initiatives have you started in order to support each other in the humanities?
So the biggest one, I think, is with two fellow grad students from my department, so Eva Ruskamp and Sonia Garza de Alba. We created a peer support group for all grad students in English, not just within the English department, just PhD students working in English, as in the language, like writing their dissertation in English.
Right.
So it's a very interdisciplinary group. We have medievalists, we have linguists, historians, anthropologists, from various backgrounds as well. We're probably the most diverse group in the whole department because of that. And so it started as kind of just a coffee hour, like, oh, let's all meet and like blow some steam and bitch a bit about the issues that we're having. But we very quickly realized that there was no such thing as networking or as relationships between grad students at our school and then at our department. We looked at the books, and just my department, there's about 160 PhD students, like registered on the list. But each of us knew maybe 3 or 4 others. And sometimes you just knew that, oh yeah, there's somebody upstairs working on, like very vague descriptive of their research, like working on museum science. But we didn't know who was doing what and how and stuff. So that started as this. Like, okay, let's get to know each other, let's recognize each other. And then we created relations, and it kind of slowly became kind of like a workshop. So people would say, hey, you know what, I'm really struggling with, this thing. And so we would all we would give like 2 or 3 weeks to think about it, and then we would come back and say, okay, and everybody would share how they specifically were dealing with that issue, and oh, maybe you could try this, maybe you could try that. And so sometimes it's not possible because it's just like a methodological like theoretical framework problem, like whatever, but that's rare. Most of the times, no, like it works. You can just transfer skills or frameworks and stuff. So that's been very, very helpful. And what we're doing right now is we're developing a website with profiles of all of us, so that not just being like, hey, yo, that's me, but more in terms of these are the skills that I have, this is what I'm at my strongest at, and as a way to offer peer support. So other grad students in the department could go and be like, you know what, I really needed help with writing a cover letter. And then they look us up and they see, oh, there's these 2 people, and that they say that's what they're really good at, things like this, and then kind of create relations. So that's really the biggest thing. Now we meet every 2 weeks. I mean, now it's online, but we still meet every 2 weeks, and so now we're working on that on that website. But that's been very helpful. People have told each other, about scholarship opportunities. People have made panels for conferences together. We peer review each other's work, both in like written or before we go to a conference. We're like, hey, can I just kind of test drive my presentation with you guys, and you tell me if it flows well, stuff like this. Which, for example, like my PhD supervisor, that's something that he would do and that he does on like a daily basis with us. But many of us don't, like, are not that lucky. There's other supervisors at my department which are not as available in terms of giving feedback on very specific things like this. So that's been very helpful for all of us. So that would be the very, very big thing, yeah, at my department.
And I think it's also a reflection of how this kind of informal spaces can build this kind of relationships, right?
Absolutely.
And how we could use the digital space for more participatory things, more inclusive, more diverse projects, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. When I was going through your profile, I've also seen that you've also had an initiative called #Indigenous Reads, kind of a book.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. How is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I started teaching here, I immediately started teaching Indigenous studies, Indigenous literatures, because there was nothing in the course catalog, and there hasn't been anything for years and years. So I offered like a couple very introductory, overview classes on cultural studies on indigenous peoples in what we now know as Canada and the US. And then I tried to offer, different classes on indigenous literatures, and I was very quickly told that there was a bit too much native stuff. And that we needed to focus more on, the classics, the core, what they need, so like with the American short story, like things like this. So what I did was I created this kind of, we call it a colloquium, like it's just for like how it is in the books at my department, but really it's a book club because it's quite informal. So we are starting our 5th semester next month. And it's like you were just saying how it starts as kind of like an informal, vague, a bit messy things, and it actually develops into like really good relationships. So it started as okay, you know what? Every month, I'm gonna tell you what I'm reading, and if you want to read it, throughout the month, and then come see me at the end of the month, and we can all talk about it. So that's how it developed into a monthly book club. So at first, mostly students came. Students, which it's interesting, I originally had in the classes that I started to offer Indigenous studies, who came to be like, why aren't you offering more classes? I want to learn more. And I was like, I'm not allowed to. Like, I was told to do, other stuff. So more and more of my former students come, and now I've been able to teach other Indigenous studies classes since then, and every time half of this class then jumps into the book club. So I try to expose them to very contemporary literature from indigenous authors. I don't focus on the genre. I actually try to keep it as diverse as I can. So we read memoirs, we read poetry, we read fiction, we read horror, we read comedy. And it actually started gathering other members as well, so from staff or like teaching colleagues from the department. Yep.
That's great.
Yep. And what is amazing is that some colleagues from different universities whom I met at conferences or stuff like this, who also work on indigenous literatures and who also felt completely isolated and alone at their universities, started joining as well. And now they are developing their like Indigenous Reads colloquium and organizing monthly book clubs on their campus or now online. So now that it's online, we kind of attend each other's book club just because we read different books, and we encourage like our students, like in each group, people encourage the others to go to the other book clubs, like because now everything is online. So I'm very proud of that because now there's others, other book clubs like this who are promoting indigenous literatures to students, and we're getting amazing feedback. Like students really want to discover this content, and here and there I even get emails with recommendations. Students be like, hey, I keep hearing about this one author, like could we please read one for the, and so then I make sure to add this. And it became important enough that actually last month we read From the Ashes by Métis Cree writer Jesse Fiesel from Toronto, and he zoomed us in for our discussion, and so students were able to ask him directly, why did you write about this? Like, what is your publishing process? Like all of this thing. So that was really amazing, and because I have been gathering kind of, like a faithful, loyal, like group of core readers. The American library here in Freiburg, the Karl Schütz House, it's like a German-American friendship relation cultural center type of thing. They organize movies, they have language classes, stuff like this. And so they have an American library, and they partnered with me on the project, and so the readers of their library could get the book and then also come into the discussion. So that is the yeah that started like you were saying, as an informal, okay, you know what, we want to read books, they're not taught in class, let's just do it on our own time. But it's developed to be so much more now, so that's something I'm very, very happy about. Students are actually asking me because they know I'm finishing and they know I'm leaving soon,
Yeah.
and they're like, how are we gonna do, are you gonna keep doing it online? Like, so I'm gonna try to organize to make sure it continues in some way even after I finish and I'm gone, because that's something that they really enjoy, that I think they absolutely need to be exposed to different literatures um, than they are in class. And then it's working. Like, it's
Mm.
just the evidence that it's working, and it's developing now at other neighboring universities. So we
Mm.
have to keep doing that. Absolutely.
So I'm sure you can speak to kind of if you're speaking to your audience, if you're speaking to your students, those students who are still very reluctant to start an initiative just because they're scared of a certain authority, or they're scared of different their positions, they're scared that their initiatives would get sabotaged. What kind of
Hmm.
what has worked for you in your initiatives and what has not worked for you, and if there is someone who would want to
So.
start such initiatives, especially be it in the humanities, and they genuinely think that it's their responsibility, that they should do it, what kind of
Hmm.
how did you navigate all these hurdles? How did you navigate? I know it's your position is totally different, but just give us an idea, like how did you manage to collaborate with each other?
So the there's one, it's a bit contradictory, but
Huh.
it's like there's two things that we can start with, and it's
Mm.
like, kind of, if the one doesn't work, then you have to do the other. Sometimes strength is in numbers. So if you have a project that you want to present, that you're passionate about, that you want to develop into something, find other students, find colleagues, find to so that you can present all together, because it looks more solid.
Mm.
And sometimes there are restrictions in terms of budget or stuff, like it can only be if the project is run by like two research assistants. You have to have a faculty kind of sponsor, stuff like this. So in these cases, prepare the group
Mhm.
before you actually even like present the project and start the project.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's the opposite. You have a really good project, you're starting it, and it's working, but you're
Mhm.
having trouble finding people to jump on ship with you.
Mhm.
So they're contradictory, that they feed into each other, like it's a bit messy. It's kind of a trial and error too. You try, you submit. I submitted proposals for budget, or for even a room, like getting a room, stuff like this. And I would be like, people would tell me no, because they don't know who I am. Like, why are you doing this? You're not even faculty, in the sense, I'm not tenured.
Mhm.
um and then on the other side, sometimes, even if you're a big group, and you have sponsorship from a faculty, something, they will be kind of like, well, you can just do that on your own. Like, why do you need us? There's enough of you. You can just do that on your own time. Because
Yeah.
of course they want you to do everything for free. Nobody wants to, like, no department wants to pay you for all of these hours of work that you're putting in stuff. Um, so that's the very hard part. It's kind of managing these two things, like building the group while building the project, while the one thing that works, it sounds stupid, and I wish it wasn't the case, but you have to keep trying. For example, for this Indigenous reads, I applied for money every semester, fourth semesters in a row, and every time I was told no for like all of them, and they would not even say why.
Mhm.
um so I would say, well, why is it, like, is it because other projects looked better, like got the funding? Is it because my application? Is it because you need more students? Like, what is it? And sometimes they would tell you, like I have other experiences with other types of scholarships where they do tell you, what the problem was, but I was never told. So what I did is I just kept applying, and every couple weeks I would apply again, and every time there was they're really vague. I don't know why, but at my university, like the development grants that they offer, like always very vague. They're like, and like for an educational project in the humanities, something like this. So I apply to all of them, and when they tell me no, the next time that they open it up, I apply again. And one that denied me 3 or 4 times in a row ended up finally accepting and funding and giving us funding. And I truly believe that it's because they got tired of seeing my name and seeing my file come up, that was their way of getting rid of me, because I really didn't change anything in the application or in the like what the project was. It was the exact same project. It was this Indigenous Reach Colloquium. The goals were the same, but so I ended up finally getting some money. So with that money, I'm buying books. So every month I buy 4 or 5 copies of the book we're reading, and I distribute them, so that students who want to participate but can't buy the books themselves can read them. And we're building kind of like a little Indigenous literature library. So it's exhausting, it's frustrating. I really wish it were not the case, that they would actually say I couldn't because, so that you can, improve, you can get better for next time, or you can find something, maybe sometimes that was just not the right project for the grant, and that's okay. But then and you look somewhere else. Um it it takes it takes a lot of work, and it's work that we're not paid for, it's hours that we're not getting back. It's really sad, that's the situation, but at the same time, that's why we need to kind of kickstart project. Now the hopeful side of this is that once this is in place, and the project actually can start and start building up, then you will get recognition from the department, from the university, and you will get more opportunities. um so I'm not just saying you have to work really hard and for free and be ready to like be slammed, like to get doors slammed in your face every day. Yes, but not only like so for example, yeah, I finally got money for that Indigenous Reads, for this peer support group that we have for like all the doctoral students. We now, one of us, my colleague Ava, sits in the Senate, in the student Senate, and she represents us there. And our website will actually be incorporated onto the department's website, like things like this, because when it starts running, people start noticing. Then there's something else, is that you can absolutely kind of copy projects, in the sense, if you see somebody doing a project at their university and it's working, when I say copy, I mean, get inspired, but also just look at how they are making it work. That doesn't mean that it's going to work, at your university, but chances are, there are very similar initiatives that you can take to really, kickstart it. So for example, with a few colleagues, we're members of both the German Association for Canadian Studies and the German Association for American Studies. And in the Association for American Studies, they started a few months ago, kind of, word of mouth initiative, like grad students coming together. They started a diversity roundtable to address the problems within the organization, within their university, and then within, German academia as a whole, in terms of discrimination, in terms of, racism, things like these. And so a few of us, like I said, are members of both associations, and we had a very informal meeting about something completely different with somebody from the board for the Association of Canadian Studies. And we told her about that project, and we said, we think this should happen here as well. We really think that such a roundtable, such a collaborative project should also be organized for this association for Canadian studies, and we are ready, to do the work. Like, they're doing this and this and that, so we're going to do the same. Like, it's working, and we even have, similar, colleagues like that can come in and stuff. Um, and she said yes. And I don't think that is only because she's also interested in anti-racist work and promoting diversity and stuff, because she is. But I think it's also because we said, look, this is what this other association is doing, this is how they are doing it, and this is how it's working. So even though we are starting from zero, we haven't done anything yet. Right now, we just have a group of people who are ready to start doing it. So I said copy, but like inspire, we're gonna work together with the other one and follow the same first steps as what they've been doing, to put ours in place and create, collaborations, and hopefully start doing this diversity, anti-racist work that is absolutely needed. Also because, again, we're not, both groups, they're not very diverse groups yet, both, racially, but then also in terms of, like disabilities and other social issues, like PhD students who also have families, who have babies, children to take care of, like stuff like this. It's not diverse yet, but I think it's our job as, first of all, white or white passing, more privileged people in the association, to really start and do the work. Now, of course, we expect and we hope for the input of all of these different marginalized groups, queer students, like our colleagues, disabled colleagues, and stuff. Like, we want to do what they need. We're not here being like, I know what you need, and I'm like, we are going to do for everybody. That is absolutely not that. But I do think that it's our responsibility to take on that work. And what I was saying, it's hours that you put in, it's work that you do for free. This is the type of free work that I'm absolutely ready to and very happy to do. I think it's kind of my duty, as a white European researcher, to do so. Hopefully that will start well. But that would be the other piece of advice. Like, if you see something similar that is working, ask them how they're doing it, and then do the same. It might not work, you always have to adapt. It's not cookie cutter. But it probably, they probably have very good ideas and ways to kind of do things better and faster, for sure.
So, since you had access to different systems, like for example, different education systems in Strasbourg, in Canada, in the USA, and now in Germany, could you tell us, like, what are the similarities and also what are the differences, their approaches to the arts and humanities? What about collaboration? What about their attitudes towards the humanities? Because I think it's crucial. Because most of us point fingers at external forces in that they trivialize us, whereas we also do things for ourselves, that we self-trivialize ourselves also. So, are there any similarities, any differences, having had access to these education systems?
That's a very good question. I don't know if that's a Strasbourg thing, but even when I was in high school, it was really much the general idea in terms of the administration, not of like the actual people in it, but that only the sciences are like real science and real career paths, and you want to do arts or you want to do literature, like you're not gonna go anywhere, you're not gonna earn a good living, like things like this. This mentality was kind of the same in North America, but to a lesser extent, and also because of the way, I think mostly the mentality is kind of the same, except it's more enabled in Europe, I feel, because of the way departments are structured and organized at university. Everything is completely by itself, completely sectioned off. There's no collaboration, and so I think it makes labs, institutes, departments kind of wary of each other. It creates kind of a competition in terms of funding. It's always like, oh, like you're like the French department, they got money for this conference and we didn't, like stuff like this. So it creates more animosity than really collaboration. But I really feel that it's because of the system, and we were talking about this with a few colleagues actually 2 weeks ago. Some of them are German, and some of them are also like non-German, like international students like me, but who have been spending some time in German academia as well. And everybody, no matter what, there was one from geography, there was one from anthropology, there was one from medieval studies, and everybody was complaining about that same thing, that each institute or department is completely fenced off and separate from the others. And so we don't know, who's working on what, and everything is completely compartmentalized. And I think that's the very big obstacle, like the also the fact that it's the way the system is, like it's the hardest thing to overcome. But people realize as soon as you start collaborations or interdisciplinary projects or things like this, people realize this, and then they also realize that even though the departments are isolated and cut off, the projects are not and should not. And that there are so many relations that we could make between researchers, between labs, and between projects, like in themselves. Putting linguists with medievalists, with historians, like you can't do anthropology without talking about linguistics and social sciences and history. Like we need each other to do humanities well. So I feel like here in Europe it's harder to do that because of the way the system is, because like, and the university is telling you like you cannot work with these people, they are not from your departments, like like chairs cannot hire a research assistant from another department. Like this is very hard to overcome. Even if they say we need both for this project, they would be like, I need a biologist and a chemist on this project, and be like, but they're from different departments, that is not possible. So it makes it very hard. This is a bit easier in North America because there's more fluidity between institutes, departments. In terms of the administration of the system, it's easier to overcome this, and to move people around, and to invite people in projects, even if they come from a different universities. Or it's easier to create these partnerships that we absolutely all need, both for our specific projects, but then also it just creates better research for students, for readers, like but yeah, in Europe that would be the big difference, is the system is in the way, like, and the system, it's like for anti-racist work, the system won't allow you to change, because if you try to enact change, that means changing the system. So of course it's going to be there standing, like defending itself. So that's the biggest obstacle. But I think that it's slowly changing also because of the rotation of personnel. Because people are replacing, workers are replacing other workers and stuff. So the mentalities are changing, and also the goals, what people bring to the table when they get a new position. People are thinking more in terms of connections and interdisciplinarity and things like this. So I think it's slowly changing, maybe too slowly for my taste. But that would be the very big difference, I feel, is the problem is the same, and the things we have to do to fix it are the same, but it feels much harder to do at European institutions because of that.
Okay. We'll wrap our discussion off with one more question. What are your future plans as a humanities educator and a student right now? What kind of a world do you believe in for the humanities and for people and human beings? And everybody in general?
So I'm finishing writing my thesis. Obviously, with this whole worldwide pandemic, switching classes online and everything, as it was for everybody, it's been very, very hard. And I these past few weeks I started changing. Like I stopped saying, I got late or I got slower. No, it's just things happened and I'm now where I'm at. I'm not as far as I had hoped I would be, maybe a year ago, for sure. But I stopped kind of saying, oh, I'm late or I lost this time, or no, there was a worldwide pandemic. The whole world is falling apart. Like we're each trying to survive and to maintain some
Yeah.
sense of normalcy. So I'm slowly finishing writing it. I'm hoping to finish it and submit and defend next year. Um, I'm going back to the US actually, so I'm now looking for a new. Well, I'm going to keep teaching for the University of Freiburg for at least a semester, maybe even the semester after that, because everything is online again. So I can continue all of my classes as as scheduled, whether I'm here or in the US. But I'm moving back home, and so I will be looking for another position over there, so teaching position or a postdoc, whatever. Um, I really hope I can stay within the field of Indigenous studies and education, because that's what I'm most passionate about. But we'll see. I was thinking of applying as well in terms of publishing positions, because the field of Indigenous literatures is booming right now, not just for academia, but in terms of publications and writers, and there's so many new books and new writers emerging and becoming very successful, both in terms of critical success, commercial success, books which are now being used in at school, things like these. So that's really something I would love to keep working on, but I don't know. In terms of, and again, like I said, I'm gonna try to keep this Indigenous Reads, like this monthly book club, even if we come back to like face-to-face teaching, maybe I'll keep that online just so that everybody can go. It's once a month, I guess. We don't have to just get rid of everything online. Even if we go back to in person, we're gonna have to create like new hybrid stuff. So these are my projects. Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. So
Wish you all the best for all your initiatives, your future, and
thank you.
you like to accomplish. Thank you, Léna, so much for joining with us today. As I told you before we started the show to talk to you, I guess this is a different perspective to a lot of us. We got to know a lot of things about your part of the world, as you've been knowing a lot about our part of the world. So yeah, I guess I wish you all the best and keep those collaborations and
Thank you.
conversations happening. I think that is, at the end of the day, that is what matters to the humanities, to have this informal space for conversation and also implementation of collaborative work. Thank you very much. I'll see you soon, Léna.
Thank you so much for having me, Tilini. Thank you so much.
No problem.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah. See you, Léna.
Thank you. See you.